Welcome to part one of Defense Horizon. Matrix Networks 2025 Cyber Resilience series kicks off with a very unique conversation around a familiar framework you might be aware of, the Cyber Defense Matrix. And while many organizations leverage this tool to help clients identify security posture gaps, we've taken it to a whole nother level based on hands-on experience with our clients over the past few years. So, with that being said, sit back, relax, enjoy the content. And if you'd like to sign up for future sessions, you can visit us at mtrx.com/events. Cheers.
What I need, right? How do I identify any gaps or things that are missing? So once I did see the cyber defense matrix, and Ryan mentioned we'd have a webinar, I don't know, a year or two on it. But still, it took me a while to really go through the motions and understand how to use it internally here at Matrix. So it's something that we are using to really identify where our security posture sits and where any gaps are, and then how we've approached, using this with clients to just help, get to that same spot of really visually seeing what do I have and what's potentially missing. So with that said, let me get into it. So as mentioned, really what I'm talking about today is going to be based on the NIST CSF or the cybersecurity framework. So just briefly here, NIST has had a cybersecurity framework for many years. They had version kind of 1.2. They released version 2 last February. If y'all need a really good thing to read to fall asleep to, just download a copy of the cybersecurity framework and just try and read it front to back. I promise you guys will be out. It's better than melatonin. With that said, there's great info in there, but it's still hard to consume. So briefly, while we're here, I like this visual. That govern piece is really in all these different security functions. So govern is really understanding, is there any compliance or frameworks that you need to make, right? What are your kind of policies, procedures around all things cybersecurity based? The matrix really does start with the identify step. So around the outside being the functions, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, which we'll be talking about a lot today. Like I said, I've read really everything out there on the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's great stuff, but I just still find it hard to consume. Right? It's a little squishy. I do find it's often really built for security teams or cybersecurity professionals. Many of us, our roles do incorporate that. Maybe we're not specifically ever gone to school or had that role, right? Being a cybersecurity professional. So I think there's great info, but I think there's an easier, better way to consume it, which is really what we're talking about today. So the cyber defense matrix, what is it? Why are we here talking about it, right? I find it a very easy way to visualize great concepts in the NIST cybersecurity framework, but just make them a lot more visual than what can be kind of squishy concepts. It does allow us to just really map out what we have in terms of assets, what we have in terms of security products, and how they fit into that framework. Again, across the top of the cyber defense matrix is those NIST functions. But what the NIST functions and really all the papers miss is how those really apply to asset classes, right? Making it just kind of nebulous. Hey, it's security stuff, and you should do this identify. But trying to apply, what am I identifying? How am I identifying it? What am I protecting? How am I protecting it? Right? What am I detecting? Again, this just adds a whole nother level or layer to that cybersecurity framework. And then really, great we have point products and we are going through these functions, but I do find that it helps really map that technology into people. So we'll be going really deep today on the functions and the assets, but to give you guys a visual of what we are talking about, of which I will show several times throughout the next hour here, is how things fit in this and how we can think about this matrix. So again, across the top here, we do have those NIST functions, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Those might seem obvious. We'll definitely be digging into those because they can also be ambiguous, especially protect, detect. Okay, what's protecting? What's detecting? Right? What does that really look like? And then down the left-hand side, one thing that really is missing from that NIST cybersecurity framework are those asset classes. right? What am I identifying? Well, when we add asset classes, which are really, kind of piece of the cyber defense matrix here, makes things just a lot easier again to visually go in and use these boxes to help identify what we have and maybe what we're lacking and really bring those gaps to life. And then across the bottom here, I think this is really great. As far as great, we have all these security point products, and those really are technology, which is here very much heavy on the left hand side, to where if we do have an incident and we need to detect, right? So detect is often going to be kind of a SOC function, right? Of hey, I'm consuming events and security operation, and then responding to that, and then recovering, right? Is very much people. And then on NIST, we saw that govern throughout all these security functions. That really looks to process here, right? Understanding, hey, I have all these point products, but how do I actually do those things, right? And the process becomes very important in detect, respond, recover, right? You don't want to be scrambling when you have an event and you respond to it, right? What got breached? How are we communicating that, right? How are we communicating the security events? So ideally, processes, all this is done up front through all these steps. And to allow us to, when something does happen, to be able to respond in an organized fashion. So really, that cyber defense matrix, again, we have those functions across the top, we have the assets on the left-hand side, and then those functions do really build on each other. Meaning we need to start with identify, right? I know it's all cliche, but how do we protect what we don't even know we have? So to identify is really, in all those asset classes, what are the sub-assets, right? What are the devices, right? What are the network flows? What is the data, right? Who are our end users, right? And it's not even our end users for the identify users, right? It's contractors. It's anybody that has access to our environments. So, and again, we'll go through that, how those really build on top of each other. And then again, the big goal here is visually, which was really the epiphany for me of security. When we need more security, what are you guys doing for security? Like, whoa, how do I even respond to that? That's very open-ended, but this just visually gives me a very intuitive way. All right, so digging into those functions, identify, this is really identifying assets, but it's also identifying risks. This is identifying how important is this thing. Not all assets are equal. Not all spreadsheets are equal. Not all endpoints are equal. Not all servers are equal. So this isn't just what things do I have for devices, network applications, data, users. But so identifying how important are they, and identifying any attack surface that we know about. Right? Hey, I know that I have an attack surface here, but then I know I'm going to put a compensating control in. Right? So really, that left to right step one is just what are we trying to cover? What's in our environment? But then again, what's the severity of it? Right? Again, not all things are the same. Then we use what we gained in identify to feed into protect. Right? So hey, I identified these Windows endpoints. Identify might also be something like vulnerability scanning, right? Hey, I know I have these things. How do I compensate those, right? What's my control? And then move into protect, right? So for the asset class device, a protect that we all do, hopefully, is deploying some kind of endpoint protection or an EDR agent, right? So hey, we identified here's an asset, and then one form of protection around that is going to be deploying something like an endpoint agent, right? So again, not everything can have an endpoint agent on it. So again, we need to identify those different asset classes and protect, right? Identify data, right? Protect might be encryption, right? That might be a way to protect. So once I identify what I have, and then I protect what I know about and protect any attack vectors, then I move into detect. So I should be getting logging and telemetry out of identify and out of my protect functions. And those should really feed into the detect function. And the detect function typically is going to look like some kind of log aggregation, a SIEM, right? Typically this would be a SOC type function, right? Security Operations Center of, hey, I'm getting login and telemetry from identify function and my protect function. Is there something here that I need to go act on? Right? Is there any actionable alerts? And then when I do find an actionable alert, then oftentimes that'll move into a respond phase, right? And maybe there are non-actionable alerts, and maybe my detect them. Hey, that is normal behavior. I can feed that back into my identify and protect functions, maybe minimize alert fatigue. Once I hit respond, hopefully we have gone through our govern and our process to know this is how we respond to an event, right? and then finally recover. And this is going to be different depending, hey, was that a leaked credential? Was it ransomware? Or more than likely, it's something in between, right? How do I get that asset back to its original, working state? And ideally, what I learn in respond and recover, I can feed back into my identify and protect functions, right? Hey, I detected this thing got through, I responded to it, I triaged it, whatever that may look like, and then, I can feed back into protect. So maybe detect is, hey, this credential got out and I didn't have MFA on it, right? Which I'm sure we're all past that point now. But that could have been I had to respond, right? Password reset, and then feed back in. How do I stop that in the future, right? Maybe enabling MFA as an example. So going through our functions on the top left, and then we do have our assets on our top right, excuse me, top left to right, and then my assets down the left-hand side. So again, we'll be going to those a whole lot. Just know that really there's a life cycle for devices, right? We go through identify, protect, detect, respond, recover for that asset class. The network asset class, the same. The application asset class, the same. The security functions on the top, those are in a specific order. The assets on the left, not so much, right? Just mentally in my brain, it makes sense. Hey, we have devices are on the network, right? Applications, data, users. But just know that there is no dependency. This can be completely intermixed on the left-hand side. However, as I've hopefully clearly already laid out, those security function orders do matter. All right, so assets, what are we meaning? Those might seem intuitive, but I do want to just kind of touch on specifically how we are applying these in the CDM. So devices are going to be everything physical. That's intuitive. However, also including devices, we're going to put things that are really attached to the devices, right? The operating system of the devices. Maybe some applications that are specific to that device, right? Yes, we have applications as a separate asset class, but when we are protecting a device, oftentimes we're also protecting the OS on that device, right? We're protecting maybe some built-in applications. So just to make a big distinction there that yes, devices are my laptop servers, phones, printers, cameras. But then also, on top of that is going to be whatever, firmware or OS that's shipped with it. Network, we might want to say, hey, that's our switches and firewalls. Yes and no. Really, network is those kind of higher layers, right? What are my communication channels? Where my network flows? I listed some protocols here, but this is also where like my firewall is going to live, right? When I, network identify, right? That's why I'm, scanning and seeing, where my security controls are. Network protect, but it's going to be like my IPS, right? Or my firewall, which again, obviously we'll get on there. Applications, again, just another distinction. This is going to be, software above the OS, right? So applications live in there. That's also going to include things like, APIs, right? More and more, you guys might be standing up your own, but chances are you're consuming APIs additionally. Data, again, fairly intuitive. I just want to call out here that when we talk about data, data lives in several different forms, right? Data at rest, that's sitting in, our traditional SAN or Windows file server, or more modernly, maybe sitting in an S3 bucket or, Azure Blob Storage. In motion, right? So it says, on the wire, as they say, right? And then data in use, as it's sitting there being served, right, in my CRM or being accessed through a database, right? And these are different areas that, we can have those different security functions applied to. Then finally, those pesky end users, right? Everything would be great without them clicking on everything that comes across their desk, but they're very much an asset class here that we need to still go through those same exact security functions for our end users. All right, so laying the groundwork here, we talked about our security functions, our asset types. Another way we can use this matrix is very much a concept of left a boom, right a boom. As you can expect, the boom is an incident. So in the cyber defense matrix, that left a boom is things that are in our control that we can do up front, specifically identify and protect. I think as IT professionals, those things come fairly naturally, right? What do I have? You guys probably have a spreadsheet somewhere, for better or worse, of your assets that you have, at least the devices piece, right? And then, protecting that. Again, those things can, come pretty intuitively to us. These are things we've been doing for a long time. So in that left to boom, right? That's our, prevention and preparation, right? That's, managing risk, and that really comes to identify, right? Identify the risk across my asset classes, right? Again, engineering preventative measures, right? That's things like deploying controls on our network, right? That's our IPS or firewalls, our layer 3, layer 4 ACLs, right? The endpoint protection, that it's encryption of data. And again, applying patches, right? So those are left of boom functions. Right of boom is, hey, something hit the fan, right? We'd have an incident that's, detecting that is, responding and recovering from it. Very much also in that left of boom, right of boom, which is again, good way of thinking about things, is also this concept of structural awareness and situational awareness, right? It's very important to have structural awareness at left of boom, right? Again, what are our assets? What are their attributes? What are those weaknesses that you've identified? And what are those things that you've done to protect those weaknesses? And then again, it's really just understanding the relationship between my end users, my devices, my applications, my data. And I really need that structural awareness to help me once I'm in a right of boom situation. Once I'm right of boom, if you don't even know what assets I have, where the data lived, right? Who's supposed to be interacting with what applications I have, it makes right of boom a whole lot more difficult, right? If you do have to, unfortunately call in incident response, right? The first questions are gonna be like, the who, how, and when. And if you don't have those structural awareness, that foundation, that left of boom, that makes right of boom much more difficult to just understand the scope that you're dealing with, right? And again, right of boom, that detect phase. If you don't even know what identify and protect, right, what is normal behavior, then how are you supposed to detect that? How do you even know you're right of boom? So again, just love this concept of structural awareness, right? These are things in my control, things I can do up front. That will then lead into my situational awareness to allow me to act on right of boom. So here we're seeing the matrix again with a little more, groundwork here, my functions, my assets, right? My left of boom, again, identify, protect, which again, I think historically we are very good at, or at least aware of, right? Things that we should be identifying, things we should be protecting. I do find that right of boom is often outside of our wheelhouse and does fall more to a security role if you have one in your organization, a SOC if you have one in your organization, or more than that, some kind of managed SOC or managed detection response, which we'll touch on. Also across the bottom, now that we kind of have this, the boom, the left and right, we can see how really that technology, right, our vulnerability scanners, our asset scanners, our MFA, our single sign-on, really are those left of boom things, which are tools we can deploy. And then that right of boom very quickly goes into people, right? Detect, yes, we can have all the AI magic we want for detect and seems to do event correlation, but often you're still a human in loop there to really know if this is a valid alert or not. And once it is, wow, respond and recover really quickly move into people, which is a great question. Do we have the people to do that, right? Or do we need to look at bringing in somebody else? All right, to try and make this even more applicable for each asset class, I did want to just quickly run through. Great, for this asset class, what do those security functions even look like? So for devices, again, our assets there are pretty easy, laptop, desktop, servers. So identify is really just going to be, inventorying what we have, right? Identifying could also be, hey, what's the patch management, right? So identify devices function could be a vulnerability scanner, right? To just understand, what we have. And then we move into protect. So okay, we know what we have, and now we want to protect it, right? That could be endpoint protection. But again, you're going to put endpoint protection on a phone, on a printer, on a network device, IP camera, right? So again, different asset classes, even, or I should say, they're really think about sub, devices inside each class, right? So again, protect Windows boxes, right? Hey, that's easy. That's a whatever endpoint protection is going to look like. It's also patch management. So again, identify could be a vulnerability scanner. Hey, that's not patched. Protect would be, yeah, patch management to roll those out. And then I put privilege management on here. And things that we can't put a agent on, right? If we do have, again, for matrix here, firewalls, switches, access points, we still need logging and telemetry, but we want to make sure that, we've secured that through, some type of either SSO or, again, in previous webinars, I've talked about, some kind of central credential storage or whatever that looks like to make sure that we have correct privilege would be a part of protect for again things that we can't put an agent on, right? And then detect. So again, protect is putting those things in place, and then detecting is then getting telemetry out of that. So again, this could be syslog. If we have an endpoint agent, right, we get copious amounts of data there. But often we're getting data from all these different sources. So detect is hey, knowing what's baseline, what we identified as normal, then anything that is out of normal would trigger detect. And detect, then we say, hey, is this normal? Great, close the case or feed that back into protect. Maybe we don't need to get alerted on anymore. That is normal behavior. Or we move on to respond, right? Hey, yep, we had an incident with the device. With the device, typically the first thing we're gonna do is isolate it. Hey, it's infected, it's impacted, right? We're gonna go put it in the corner, or use our endpoint agent to quarantine it, or shut down the network port, whatever that looks like. Typically, that is going to be some kind of malware or something on the device or a compromised application. So patching it, generally moving the threat, and then recovery can look like a lot of things, right? Maybe we dealt that in the respond, or maybe it's just reimaging the device or whatever it looks like. So again, devices is kind of give me the general flow at a high level. Networks, right? What does network identify look like? Again, this is mapping out assets, but also understanding traffic flow and connections, right? Do these things talk to each other, right? That's part of that situational awareness, right? What is the flow, right? Do I have the controls here? Also identifies what are these network segments connected to, right? Or VPNs, right? Do we have third parties? Do we have remote access, right? All these things of how do we access, right? So think about these are really those flows. Also, maybe NetFlow is in here, right? Protect is really going to be, security services. So these are our IPS, our next gen firewall, maybe anti-malware in the network, right? And then segmentation can be a big part of Protect, right? Hey, I know I have these assets and they're sensitive, right? Maybe I have an OT/IT environment, right? But those, notion of OT/IT, that's really at that network level, right? Segmentation can be a tool there. Detect, right? So maybe I'm doing NetFlow or syslog. Those going to feed into a platform where I can see spot anomalies. Hey, that thing's trying to talk to that thing. That's not normal, right? So I need the detect function even surface those things and then allow me to then respond to them and recover from them. Applications, right? Again, starting with identify. What do I have? uh, Protect, right? So applications can be several things. Many organizations can have homegrown applications. So, right, if you have a dev environment, right, secure, coding practices. Oftentimes, if it's third party, protect can be difficult, right? Maybe we do need to rely on something to sandbox it, or again, vulnerability scanning could still come into account here. What do I have? What version is it? Do I need to patch it? If I do host it myself, again, secure coding practices or web application filter, right? Protect could be something like a WAF, right? Web application firewall. Detect, again, I should be getting telemetry out of identify protect, feed in detect, and then be able to respond. Again, for respond, patching might be rolling back, patching, quarantining, and then again, recover could be if it's your own app, right, rolling back to a previous, git commit or whatever that may look like. All right, data. I know in my career, data identify is always a challenge, right? End users are just generating data and they like to spray it everywhere. It's on their desktop, it's on the file share, it's in their email. So data identify can be a real challenge, at least I know historically has been. So, but that makes it just that much more important, right? You do not have situational awareness if you don't even know where this is living, what the severity of it is, right? And identify, right? When we think about government or military, oftentimes it's we have that's publicly accessible up to top secret, right? Code red kind of status. So again, for data, I know that's a challenge, but just because of the challenge doesn't mean we get to ignore it or not do it. So again, identify what is it, what how important is it? Protect, right? Again, encryption is one of the big ones here. Encryption and then again DLP, right? If I don't have data there, data loss prevention or data leak prevention lets me track that. Governance is also a huge part of data. And DLP, again, I can identify only these people should be touching HIPAA information or PCI information or whatever my compliance is. And then, encryption and then DLP allows me to hey, I know that these two people should be touching this data, these people shouldn't, right? So again, DOP can be a strategy. Also, basic, access control list, right? Hey, are your credentials even scoped to allow you access that data? And again, detect, right? Hey, someone accessed something they shouldn't, or I see a lot of data moving a place it shouldn't be, right? And then respond, go limit the data, understand where it went, right? So again, this is where that situational and structural awareness becomes super important. And then again, recover. Oftentimes, hey, we got all ransomware, right? How to recover? Give me backups. Then before we get to the asset class of user, I think there's there's these words of identity and zero trust and user. You want to kind of level set, at least in the CDM. A user is a person, right? They're going to be some kind of human interacting with the environment. There's also a notion of an identity, and oftentimes we mix those two, right? A user does have an identity, but an identity can also be assigned to other asset types, right? Devices kind of identity, right? The device identity could be IP address and host name, right, or device type, right? Data could have identities, right? Applications can have identities. So just to not conflate those things, like, oh, a user has an identity, especially when you talk about zero trust, right? That can be, oh, identity-based, access control. But we still want to separate, hey, we still have, humans in the mix. Then users, again, one of our most trickiest asset classes because they can, often do whatever they want. And oftentimes you do see stats to where users are where a lot of our vulnerabilities come from, specifically phishing, right? They just love to give their creds away. They love to see when the FedEx package is coming. So again, this is really a special user class that is oftentimes even more out of our control than the other user classes. So just something to keep in mind that users often do take their own kind of special thought when thinking about these steps. So identify, right? Ideally, you guys have some kind of Active Directory or IDP that we have users in. But I think in IT, it's also easy to think of users as in users or end users, right? Uh, Oftentimes, I see contractors are left out here, or third parties have access to our environments. So really, it's identifying anybody has access to any of our asset classes, right? Maybe they have access to our data. They have access to our OT network. They have access to these devices, right? They have access to the camera system. We got to keep those users in account too. Those are still users in our environment. How do we protect users? Right? MFA, role-based access control. Another way we can protect users is security awareness training, right? Trying to educate them. Detect, this is often going to be, are they doing something that I expect them to do, right? User behavior awareness. Also try to detect, right? Falls in like insider threat, right? Hey, someone, slip somebody, some amount of money, and now they're going to try and do something to harm my organization, right? So again, that falls into the detect. So often that user behavior awareness or them accessing something that shouldn't be. And then respond. Often respond is, hey, the creds got away or the creds are doing something they shouldn't be, right? Disable that. And then recover, right? That could be, reinstating password reset. Maybe, oftentimes in user, these could also be HRs in the mix here too. So again, just definitely a unique user class that I think as IT folk aren't always best in thinking through. Hey, how do we really protect those end users? How do we detect when something is happening with their creds or user count that they shouldn't be? Right, so a few more kind of examples here, or a few examples of how this can come into play. So for that phishing and user testing, what does that look like? So if you think about it, phish tests are really a user identify function, right? I'm going to look in the matrix, we're going to look at all these boxes, right? What's the user identify? That's phish testing, right? A phish test, something like a phish test allows us to find the vulnerabilities in our end users, right? Just like we do a vulnerability scan for devices and applications. Well, a phish test is almost a vulnerability scan for our end users, right? And then phish awareness, right, or user awareness training here at Matrix. I get to manage our security practice, and I get to send arguably cheesy security awareness training videos to my end users. But it does keep those things on top of mind, and tries to repetitively tell them, hey, these things are important. So that's really a user protect function, right, of that security awareness training. And then again, user detect, that could be that, user behavior. These people are doing something that is really out of line. Vulnerability scanning and pen testing, right? Again, vulnerability scanning, I kind of mentioned it, but that's really is an identify function, right? Is, hey, I see vulnerabilities here. And then a protect of that could be patching, yes, but then, pen testing is also can fall to protect, right? Hey, we identified things, we protected them, and now we're, testing those protect functions. So I keep mentioning that left to boom, identify, protect. Again, those are things that are probably already in your environment. I do find the matrix helpful of, I can almost guarantee that not all those boxes are filled. Do they all need to be filled? That's kind of a government process thing, right? Again, maybe we don't have, asset classes that really, fall into those. Chances are you guys do. Again, that's really why the cyber defense matrix is making it visually easy to, fill that thing in and see, where I do have gaps. So I keep saying detect, detect, detect. Really, what I am talking about are really industry standard we see here as a SIEM, right? Or security information and event management. So organizations, which again, if you're a team of one or a small team or just Windows administrators, this is often where we see, are you really up for or have the capability internally to run a SIEM? Who even looks at the SIEM, right? This is probably going to be a SOC, right? Security Operations Center or security professional. So oftentimes we do see those things as helpful once we start going right a boom that maybe third parties can, kind of step in here. Um, anyway, when we were talking about tech, typically we were talking SIEM, right? Hey, I want to send events from all my different asset classes in the identify function, the protect function into a SIEM. The SIEM then acts as that detect function. Again, that is part technology, being a log aggregation, part human, right? Triaging those alerts, looking at those alerts, and then moving on to the additional security functions if needed. You'll see here, often detect, user class detect. Again, that could be, again, user behavior awareness. Often one that can be a little trickier, that we aren't just sending raw log data into a SIEM. And then we'd have XDR, extended detection response, which I'll touch on next, but that's really, ideally, we're feeding everything into one central log management, right? You hear this, the attackers have to be right once, and we have to be right a zillion times. Well, you'll find that attackers are typically pretty noisy, but they could be noisy coming in at the network asset layer, right? And then they could be poking at the data asset layer, all while maybe lurking on a device asset layer, right? So again, having these all feed into a unified detect function can be helpful. All right, so it's my last one to say it, guys, but that left is really, left to boom is where I find us, and even Matrix, right? Here at Matrix, what we services that we sell, support, deploy often do come to this left of boom, right? We're selling, network security, we are selling, endpoint, we're selling, application awareness, right? Network awareness. And where again, I think this is a natural spot for a lot of us IT folks to live, right? So examples here, right? Device identify, I mentioned, vuln scanner and asset management. And ideally, that's on an Excel spreadsheet. Ideally, that is something that is, constantly being updated, right? Network identify, right? NetFlow. Then again, vulnerability scanners, really kind of at that network level, right? Asset management for applications, data discovery for data, and then users, right? That's that fish testing, and then that MFA, right, for user identify. Then protect, right? Again, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the EDR. Just keep in mind that a lot of things live in devices that are not our Windows or Mac endpoints. IoT, cameras, printers. These are things that, again, I think oftentimes they don't think that all the way through. There are ways to protect those devices, right? Patch management, again, access control. I know I did a webinar a month or two ago where I talked about don't expose the management interface. That's a device protect, right? Device identify is, hey, the management interface is open. Device protect is putting controls to not have those management interfaces for equipment open, right? So network, again, this is where a lot of, where Matrix lives and a lot of where you guys live, right? We have our firewalls, but again, firewall is one square on protect on this, cyber defense matrix, which again, a lot of times then we put all of our eggs in that basket, and this matrix just really helps us. Hey, that is just one box here that we are checking, filling, I should say, when talking about our protect functions for our device asset classes. Apps, again, WAF if we're hosting it, CASB, a cloud app security broker for consuming SaaS apps, right? Data, I mentioned encryption, and then users. If you think about email security, what is the point of email security? That is protecting our users, right? We're stopping threats before it gets into their inboxes, right? Email security could also be a device protect, right? If we're stopping malware, malware doesn't impact our end users. Malware impacts devices. So again, email security could arguably also be a device protect to stop malware, but it's also user protect to stop those phishing emails and those FedEx packages that they really want to know about, right? All right, so again, we've identified across our assets, we protected across our assets. I should say this is not obviously exhaustive, right? These are just some examples to try and put a fine point. And then how do we detect, right? So again, we have SIEMs, right? We feed in log aggregation, log management systems that aggregate alerts and surface them. Then we also have managed detection and response. MDR does have the word respond. Arguably, should be really be in that detect and respond. Managed detection and response is really, hey, the recognition. I don't have a SOC. I'm not sitting there eyes on glass 24/7, right? Letting someone else do it. Managed detection. They host the SIEM, then they respond. So that could be an all-in-one service, or if it's not, again, maybe if you have your own SOC, oftentimes they would be the ones to respond, or this could be application owner. Again, this gets very much down to your business and the big green line at the bottom, the process. You should know who's doing what at what squares, right? How does this flow through, right? That's our process and really our govern. Or if you don't have those, right, respond can often look like IR, incident response, right? Oh, crap, it hit the fan. Now I need to respond. Often that is bringing an incident response. Again, it doesn't have to be no crap, right? Incident response, right? There are incident response retainers that can be part of your process. That's part of your govern, right? Hey, we have an incident response retainer. If something does surface and detect and we need to respond, right? I know who to call. I know the process I am following to get there. And then I recover, right? So this is the really much the people part, right? Again, you might think of backups as a left of boom function. Yes, we do backups, hopefully left of boom, but really, what is their point, right? Backups hopefully are insurance. Hopefully, we only use them to recover, right? So again, it's very much a people function. So I hope that gives you guys a really good idea of how this matrix works, and then how we help our clients really kind of go through this exercise, right? Of hey, let's sit down, let's go through this. Again, myself and the rest of the team here have really been boning up on this and use it internally. Have helped use it with our clients. I also do want to put throw out there the fact that right now we're looking at very two-dimension, and right now I lumped everything into one big matrix. Well, there's a good chance that you guys shouldn't have one big matrix that covers everything, right? You can very much, hey, for the PCI environment, this. For the OT environment, here's this matrix, right? So again, don't think that this is just a 2D, hey, it's just the one matrix doesn't cover my whole org. Maybe there is kind of a master matrix that allows you to look at it in this fashion. But oftentimes, I'll find that, hey, our Azure environment needs its own matrix, or we have intellectual property, or we have our own tool. So again, do know that oftentimes we can see this go into several different areas.